Sing High, Sing Low with Vash Kennett.
Let's sing high and let's sing low of our country long ago, how the people made it grow. Come and hear my story. Let's take pioneering trips, railroads, wagons, sailing ships, over plains and mountain tips. Come and hear this story. Hi. How would you like to come and hear the story of living a long, long time ago? I wonder if you haven't some chores that you do around your house. Maybe you sweep the walk, or maybe you mow the lawn. Or if you're a girl, you might wash the dishes at night, or maybe help dust the house. But none of your chores, I'm sure, take you very long. They certainly don't take you all day, because you go to school and you probably play after school, maybe watch television. And certainly none of your chores really make the difference between your family eating or not. Well, you know, it would have been very different if you and I had lived many, many years ago, in the earliest days of our country when the first settlers came. Do you know that even if you were only 4 or 5 years old, you would have had to work from the time you got up in the morning until the time that you went to bed at night? You would have helped your mother and your father, maybe weeding in the garden or making clothing, something that really would make the difference as to whether or not your family would eat and would have something to wear. Well, let's pretend that we are going to spend a day in early, early times. Now, you would have gotten up just like you do now, but no clock. You wouldn't have known even what time it was, except by the sun maybe coming in through the trees, through the window. And then you would have washed your face, but instead of having warm water and soap, it probably would have been cold water from the spring. And next you would have gotten dressed. And you know, even before you got dressed and even before sunrise, I'll bet Daddy would be up, because he would have to make the fire. And that was a very complicated matter. There were no matches in those days. He had to take some flint instead and rub it together to get a spark, and then start the fire. And the pot of water would be put on, and all the cooking was done in that fireplace. And Mother, meanwhile, would have her chores to get breakfast ready. You know, if you wanted breakfast today, it's very simple. Your mother would just go to the supermarket. And she'd have a basket like this. And she'd be able to just buy any number of things, cereal and bread and sugar. All of these things she could take home and just practically open and serve immediately. Even the eggs. No bother to have chickens. No, she can just go to the store and get them. And jam for the toast. And milk, grapefruit, orange juice, any of these things. Very simple to buy. And Mother just took them home, opened the package, and served them. But supposing now we're living many, many years ago, then it would be different. For Mother would have to start a great big pot of mush on the stove. And we would have had to wait for breakfast for a long, long time, because it took a long time to boil the water. And perhaps the daughters in the family would have to grind the meal, the cornmeal, from which she'd make that mush. And that would take time. Well, meanwhile, the boys would go outside to help their father. They'd put on their clothing, which would be quite different than what you and I wear today. It would be very rough and kind of coarse. They might have a jacket that would be very soft, that was made out of deer skin. Anyway, they'd go outside to help Daddy. And there they would do many kinds of chores. They'd be hoeing in the garden, planting perhaps a new crop. Or if it were time, They might be harvesting the one that they had planted some time before. There would be land to clear and timber to be cut, and many, many different chores. The hoeing in the field was one of the main projects for the family. They would hoe and they would weed, and even the small children, as I mentioned before, would help in this project. I know a song about this very thing, about a young man. This is a true story, incidentally, who went down to mow in his field. There he had an accident. It's called Springfield Mountain. On Springfield Mountain there did dwell a lovely youth, I knew him well. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. This lovely youth one day did go down to the meadow for to mow. He mowed a while and then did feel a poisoned serpent bite his heel. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. He turned around and with a blow he laid that pesky serpent low. They carried him to Molly dear, which made her feel so very queer. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. Oh, Johnny dear, why did you go down to the meadow for to mow? To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. Why, Molly dear, I suppose you know, when grass gets ripe, you must mow. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. So Johnny died, gave up the ghost, and off to heaven he did post. Come all young girls and shed one tear for this young man that died right here. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew. Come all young men and warning take, and don't get bit by a rattlesnake. To Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. Well, that was a sad story. Well, sometimes the families had fun by going outside. They would gather berries, have kind of a family picnic. And they would, perhaps gather nuts in the woods or find a maple tree in which they would tap, and from the sap they'd be able to make syrup for their biscuits. Now, their lunch would be quite different than what you and I think of as far as lunch goes. Instead of a hamburger and a milkshake, they'd have really what would be closer to our dinner. They'd have beef or pork that Mother had salted in order to keep it fresh. In fact, Mother and the daughters would spend many, many hours salting down that pork to keep it fresh. And so the day would pass, and night would come, and the family would gather after all of their chores for the evening chores, which were a little bit different. And they'd gather around the fireplace at night. Father might be making a pair of shoes. The children might be helping to spin. Mother would be mending or making some other kind of clothing. And then bedtime would come. And this would mean that the older children would go upstairs, where they slept in the loft. Actually, they went up a ladder, and they would wrap up in warm fur skins and go to sleep. And the little ones slept downstairs where the mother and father were, in the great big room. And if they had a little doll, they might put her to sleep like this. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little ponies, black and bay, brown and gray, all the pretty little ponies. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little ponies, black and bay, brown and gray, all the pretty little ponies. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little ponies, black and bay, brown and gray, all the pretty little ponies. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby. That was nice, wasn't it? Well, as you can see, life would be very, very different. Can you imagine your mother, for example, not going to the freezer to get her vegetables out, but instead going to some place called a root cellar, in which she kept her potatoes and her beans and her squashes? Well, all of these things were different, from the way that the people lived, the clothing they wore, the food that they ate, where they kept it, and where they went to bed at night. Even that warm fur skin is quite a different sort of proposition than the blanket that you and I would use. Well, I think they had fun, even though life was very hard. And I'm glad they came, and I'm sure you are too. Well, I guess it's time to go. Let's sing high and let's sing low of our country long ago, how the people made it grow. Come and hear this story. Let's take pioneering trips, railroads, wagons, sailing ships, over plains and mountain tips. Come and hear this story.
This is National Educational Television.